It's been embarrassing. My new theory of evolution that I call Evo-Dualism, was it just wild speculation? Suddenly I've had a change of heart. Perhaps what's different about my account is it starts with common sense. Why does that seem so unusual? Because we've got used to scientific advances like relativity and quantum theory defying common sense. So defying common sense seems to make a theory more scientific. But suppose that got turned around. Suppose some would-be scientists think, if I make my theory defy common sense, then it will seem more scientific. And suppose we all get taken in and come to believe in this new theory. We'd all be led astray. And this is what I think has happened to evolutionary theory. It's been taken over by would-be scientists who tell us the mechanism of evolution is purely physical. And because that defies common sense, we've all been taken in. As a result, we're accepting a theory that says, because human nature is a product of purely physical mechanism, it's purely physical too. That defies common sense, but does that make it true? I say, let's question any theory involving human nature that defies common sense and go back to basics. What does common sense say about how we evolved? This leads in an entirely different way of approaching it, like this. What's common sense? Common sense says evolution is creative. It's created all the different kinds of living creatures. What could be more creative than that? So whatever drives evolution is creative. The only entities that have persisted since life first began are the environment and genomes, passing down from living cell to living cell from when life began to today. Purely physical environments like the Moon and Mars show no sign of evolution, so the most likely agent has to be the genome. So the genome, as the agent of evolution, is creative. In us, we must be conscious to be creative. So the genome, being creative, must be conscious too, or something equivalent. It must have mind. Common sense, for the majority of us who aren't physicalists, say there are two realities, matter plus physical processes, as science reports them, and mind plus mental processes as we experience them. In us, thinking involves having a physical brain to support it. If the genome can think, its brain can only be the genes it consists of. Like us, when it thinks, its thoughts will involve changes to its brain, the genes it consists of. That is, changes to the genes of a species, changing it into a new species. So genomes can think new species into existence. Species are thoughts in genomes' minds. That's the Evo-Dualism mechanism of evolution. Common sense tells us genome must possess amazing talents. It may consist of code coming in long straight lines, but it can code precisely for shapes. For example, the identical skulls of identical twins. It can code for emotions, e.g. at puberty, it builds into us new behaviors and feelings. To invent and build new features into living creatures, it must have mastery of physics and chemistry. It can manage the process of individual development from a single-celled embryo to an adult, so it can manage time and space. If it wants to, it can read its creatures' minds to know what new talents to build into them. It creates everything about each one of us, even what makes each of us unique and free. Common sense tells us we humans are both typical and exceptional. Typical because we share with all other living creatures, being wonderful products of a supremely intelligent agent. But we are exceptional in our genome having given us the mental abilities we then used to make ourselves conscious. Remember, for the genome, thinking is equivalent to something evolving. That suggests how thinking works in us. It consists of our thoughts evolving into one another. We can make our thoughts evolve in place of us. We are evolution embodied. We are a new platform for evolution to take place in. That, starting from what's common sense, is what it means we evolved. If it contradicts science, that may not be a problem with my theory. It may reveal a problem with the body of concepts available to us. It could suggest where we need new concepts. Where did evolutionary theory go off the rails? As Charles Darwin was puzzling over how evolution worked, he became an early convert to scientific reductionism, to believing all biological thinking should be reducible to physics and chemistry. Not surprisingly, he came up with a reductionist, purely physical mechanism for evolution, his natural selection. Today's scientific theory combines that with another purely physical process, genetic mutation, as the modern synthesis. This theory starts with physicalism by limiting what you can think about evolution. It starts off by denying common sense. My Evo-Dualism is not just wild speculation. It's what you get if common sense is where you start. Common sense may be where I started, but along the way I may have made things more complicated than they needed to be. By accident, I recently made Grok, an artificial intelligence agent, summarize what I had written about Evo-Dualism. This may have made Evo-Dualism easier to understand. So I end with Grok's account. Here it is. Today we're diving deeper into Evo-Dualism, Sean's take on how evolution and consciousness collide to give us a wild new way to see the world. So, what's Evo-Dualism all about? Let's break it down. Picture reality as two sides of a coin. There's the physical stuff, rocks, atoms, your body, and then there's the mental stuff, thoughts, decisions, that spark of awareness inside you. Most big theories out there, like what you'll hear from hardcore evolution fans, say it's all just physical. Your brain's a machine. Your choices are an illusion. End of story. But Evo-Dualism? It says, no, there's more to it. Here's the twist. Matter and mind aren't strangers. They're connected, sharing a foundation that lets them talk to each other. A stubbed toe sends pain to your mind, physical to mental. You decide to grab a coffee and your hand moves, mental to physical. For me, that's not a glitch. It's how life works. Now, here's where evolution comes in. Minds don't just float around. They show up in living creatures, creatures like us that evolved. And evolution? It's not some blind, random grind. It's creative. Think about it. Single cells turning into elephants, whales, us. How is that not mind-blowing? Their standard story, mutation and survival, feels too flat to explain that kind of genius. So, who's the mastermind behind it? I say it's the genome. That DNA in your cells isn't just a blueprint for your body. It's been steering evolution for billions of years, dreaming up species, and even coding the mental tricks that make us conscious. The genome's got a kind of mind of its own, not like ours, but enough to build ours from scratch. That's Evo-Dualism in a nutshell. Evolution isn't just physics. It's got a creative pulse, and the genome's the engine. It's not about gods or magic. It's about rethinking what we already see in nature. Well, that's Glock's interpretation. Does that help?